willing to come and read for us today. So thanks to you both. Laura's coming to us from Arlington, Virginia, is that right? And she's coming with her fourth book called First Do No Harm. She has a background in both medicine and writing, so this seems particularly appropriate. And her poems reflect on how consciousness and nature interact. And I'm sure she'll be willing to tell us a little bit more about that. Her previous works have included Luna Parks, The Snow on Lake Como, and Exile at Sarzana. Am I pronouncing that right?
Perfect.
Excellent. We also have Richard Harteis here from Uncasville, and he's presenting work from his 15th book, aptly titled Reunion. And I'm sure he's going to tell us a little bit about how that title came to be. Beyond poetry, Richard has also been a 35mm cinematographer and a radio host on NPR, and he's currently serving as the president of the William Meredith Foundation. He's been in that position since 2007, is that correct? So 10 years. I'm not going to list all of his previous works, but I'll let him tell you which one is his favorite, right? So maybe we'll start with Laura.
No, I think I'm going to go first and let Laura do the important work, the heavy
perfect.
work.
Excellent. So let's give him a warm welcome. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Well, I think Jesus said, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name. That's a little sacrilegious, but there also go I. You know, one always hopes for a large audience, but you know, on a summer evening. I want to thank Bank Square Books for their kind reception. And I should say, too, we have these wonderful Mystic Seaport Journal collection of William Meredith's poetry, the leather-bound books that you see there. And if you buy any book this evening, you get one of those books for free. So just take one with you. They're a really wonderful collection. William died in 2007, and the foundation tries to continue his legacy. I sometimes say that when the great ones die, they fall off the planet, and we don't want that to happen with William. They're never anthologized, you don't see them. And it's a pity because they have a whole lifetime of wisdom and creative work that they have created. So that's what we're doing. And this is a book that Mystic Seaport is kindly providing for us tonight. I sometimes start with a little poem of William's, a major work. Kind of an ironic title because love is a major work.
Indeed.
Poems are hard to read, pictures are hard to see, music is hard to hear, and people are hard to love. But whether from brute need or divine energy, at last, mind, eye, and ear, and the great sloth heart will move. So one hopes, especially in these politically turbulent times. We want to make sure that the good folks here at Mystic, or at the Bank Square Books, aren't kept beyond their measure, so each of us get about 20 minutes, Laura. This fancy cover, I was explaining to Dr. Miller, Laura's husband, who's come up from Virginia, is a poster on the bus stop door in Varna on the Black Sea, and it has a guy sitting there reading his Koran. That's the right way. And this guy's standing on it. This person is washing their hair. In other words, if you've only ever had a Turkish John, this is the right way to do it. So to explain what this cover is from. Hopefully it attracts readers. Reunion. Last summer, I had 3 reunions. One was a family reunion in Western Pennsylvania. The second was a reunion in Switzerland, where I went for my 50th class reunion in Georgetown for junior abroad. And then I met up with friends in Bulgaria, where I carried my partner's ashes to the Ruta monastery. I was on a Fulbright there, and we spent a couple years together, and we're very pleased to be. I was pleased. Let his spirit dance on the wind. So That's what this book is about. So I'm going to read you a section from each of these reunions. And Nancy's promised to bring out the hook when the time comes, right, Nancy? Because I haven't timed any of this, is the point. Lovely the way long-term memory leads the pack when you get older and leaves short-term memory in the dust. This morning, out of the blue, I recall the name of the journalist Ivan Gravoilev, who took me to the soothsayer Vanga down near the Greek border. And as the vapors rose over the volcano floor where she lived, my mind said to her, will I be wed to these mountains? Will I be born again? In this morning's acceptance note to my cousin Jerry and his wife, I tried to lay the groundwork for my behavior. I remember my mother telling us 3 subjects of conversation were not permitted: politics, religion, and sex. These are the only things worth talking about, of course. But I'll do my best to listen to my mother. There are bound to be moments when the election comes up. Mind you, I was writing this whole thing during Trump's ascendancy to power. So that's a subplot that goes through the book. Should I say or should I go? I sent Jerry a photo of Sydney dressed in her support dog outfit to prepare him for the fact that she'd be traveling with me. Here she is. This book is loaded with photographs, by the way. It's a little risky, but I'm going to do this. I remember sleeping with Jerry as a boy. On the farm, all the boys were housed in the boys' dorm. Aunt Ruth bore 14 living children. And the younger ones shared a bed with visiting cousins like me. Turns out I wasn't exactly prepubescent and didn't sleep until it was time to milk the cows, wondering if he would touch the erection that had flowered in my tidy whities. Boy stuff. But a phrase for it says, out of which one should normally have grown by then. Well, Freud's been somewhat debunked by Adler and others, I believe. Look at America. Same-sex marriage legal in all 50 states. Join the Boy Scouts if you're gay and game. That many people who never moved on to loving their mother and wishing to murder their father. I think we are all part of the Rainbow Coalition at some level, somewhere along the spectrum. Allen Ginsberg, a friend, used to carry a little ukulele around on occasion and sing, oh, everybody's just a little homosexual. Who hasn't admired a boy in a baseball cap with rosy cheeks or something like that? We rode ponies bareback, and when the horse would lower its head galloping down a hill, there was no way you could hold on to its mane. You were young enough, and your bones were green enough not to break when you rolled over his head and onto the alfalfa field. Very young, age 5 perhaps, I approached the ladies drinking tea on the porch, holding a live weasel by the tail as it tried to reach up and bite the hand and wrist that held it. The ladies screamed at me. I let it drop and it ran beneath the house. The family had grown so used to the smell of cow dung, they might have been living in a pine forest. Boots and Macintoshes lined up for travel to the barn, the odor permeating the mudroom and the entire farmhouse. By the end of summer, I didn't notice it any more than a cat lover notices the smell of a litter box in the bathroom. So this western branch of the family did very well. They were Amway diamond people. They had their own farms. They kind of charlatans. But at any rate, I came together with my cousin and finally liked him quite a lot. Are you a charlatan? I asked Jerry after a certain amount of gin and pot. Are you like Donald Trump? And he, training natural disposition, smiled the question away. I was hooked. Bug-eyed, like me, a gentle person, very glad to see this part of him and his beautiful wife, Polly. Turns out these are pretty classy folks, and it was well worth the while to disabuse myself of the sort of prejudice I have been fed over the years. It's family stuff, family reunion. So the next reunion is in Switzerland. Well, I have a Trump interlude on page 23 here. Now, in the interest of time, we're going to move on to page 75, which is the Fribourg reunion. These black and white photos from 1967 in Fribourg give you a sense of the before and after. John Carr is the hairy-chested guy in the upper right, and the in-shape teenager below him is me with my English girlfriend Alexandra Wood. Left of that, dramatic at my desk, is Richie in black, trying to look like a Russian prince. Above that, me and John Carr visiting Rudy van Sassen at his family's summer home in the Zuiderzee in Holland, where we had gone sailing like all teenagers. I sported a beard to make me look older, and now sport one to make me look distinguished, possibly. A good time was had by all, as these pictures show, but what they don't show is the love for each other that flowed as freely as the wine at the tables we broke bread together and dipped into a pot of boiling Gruyere and Emmental cheese. Each of us had achieved varying levels of accomplishment. Our zillionaire classmate, Doug Casey, didn't make it to the reunion, but these friends all had earned some status in their life that had nothing to do with money. One continued years later looking after a husband in a wheelchair. Another had beat cancer in a major way. A career in banking that took him for years to Japan, where he became so enamored of the culture, he built his own tea ceremony house. Beautiful Lynn had become gay, like me, I guess, living with her partner in Vermont. She radiated such competence and compassion and goodwill. The closest thing I can think of to describe how I felt at dinner with these lovely folks is the James Wright poem, The Blessing, which I will include here if I can get the right to reproduce it. I did it, I've learned from Bulgarian publication, just steal it. Just take it. Just take it from the internet, put it on there, why not? Nobody's going to really come after you, I hope. I would like, anyway, I give him credit. It's called A Blessing. I have chronic dry eye, I'm not crying. Chronic. A Blessing. Do you know this poem by James Wright? Just off the highway to Rochester, Minnesota, twilight bounds softly forth on the grass, and the eyes of those two Indian ponies darken with kindness. They have come gladly out of the willows to welcome my friend and me. We step over the barbed wire into the pasture where they have been grazing all day alone. They ripple tensely. They can hardly contain their happiness that we have come. They bow and bow shyly as wet swans. They love each other. There is no loneliness like theirs. At home once more, they begin munching the young tufts of spring in the darkness. I would like to hold the slender one in my arms, for she has walked over to me and nuzzled my left hand. She is black and white. Her mane falls wild on her forehead, and the light breeze moves me to caress her long ear that is delicate as the skin over a girl's wrist. Suddenly I realize that if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom. This guy's great. That's James Wright. Anyway, it's what caught me. So, this is a little, get the hook ready, Nancy. Okay. We're still in reunion 2. I should cut this, but anyway. Once when William and I were touring Canada in my little orange Porsche, we called Louis Cronenberger, who had a palatial summer cottage miles away from town, or official campsite, and we were told we could drop in for a drink. When we got there, we were offered a martini at the cocktail party he was hosting for his house guests, and we were sent on our way without even an offer of a shower or a place to pitch our tent. We had been Cronenbergered. a word that came to mean being given the shaft in a major way. Once you have money, you can quite truthfully affirm that money isn't everything, he said famously in an essay, which gives you an idea of what a crank and a snob he was. By the end of the day at the castle, I felt a little like, no, we're at the Gruyere, which is a castle in Switzerland. And by the end of the day at the castle, I felt a little like the guy in one of the paintings I saw earlier in the day in the fantastic art room. As I turned off the bedside light in my hotel room and thought of what tomorrow might bring. But sometimes a poem comes at night, sometimes early in the morning. And when you cannot sleep, Nancy cures her insomnia by repeating poems that she knows, as I did, thinking of the time William and I were Cronenbergered. So this is a little, it's a kind of William Carlos Williams, nothing but in things. You just say the thing, and that can be enough, maybe. It's called Canada Poem. It grew late. The stars were beginning to fall. We pulled off the side of the road and pitched our tent in an open field. Our sleeping bags were warm as toast. In the morning, there was frost on the grass, and 5 beautiful cows with large eyes wondering what had plopped down in the middle of their pasture. So that's a little intro. This is number 3. This is the third tour, more or less. See, there really are pictures everywhere in this book, so you should, you know, As we walked up the hill, a beautiful dog lay curled in sleep at the foot of the staffs that the monks had obviously left for hikers to borrow. The dog looked exactly like my own dog, Sydney, except she was white where Sydney is silver. But the head and markings were the same. She was a mountain dog, apparently. It had come mysteriously from the hills and lived on the kindness of taxi drivers and tourists who gave her scraps. I put out my hand and she seemed to know me immediately. She lifted herself from her bed and led us up the hill. I had kept William's ashes in a carved wooden box with a screw-top lid that had been given or pinched from an English cousin that time we visited her at the end of her life at Oxford. Later that night, the cameraman got a close-up of the small white cloud as I poured his ashes into the greenery along the pathway. We said the Our Father and returned to the monastery and had a small cafe behind the monastery. More vodka for Lydia, more rakia for me, and a Coke for Marty. I gave him now my coat because he was shivering, and by then I was too. Lots of jokes about being abandoned, but it was getting serious. A taxi would take another hour to come for us. But at the head of the parking, a man who had lived in Hyannis on Cape Cod, yet another beauty, offered to take us back to town for $20 in hopes his boss would not be back before then. He put us into a lovely warm VW, and we were off rolling down the mountain, dodging the massive trucks and blue uniformed workers who would be there till 7 or later, trying to meet the deadline of getting the road completed. The driver left me at my hotel, and I got a good nap, and we all reconnoitered for dinner at Diva along the river running through Blagoevgrad. This was to be Lucien's treat, and we told him we were going to have massive desserts when we caught up with him at Diva. But before dinner and the nap, as the driver pulled up to the hotel, Marty rolled down his window and said to me, "We did something very good here today." How am I doing book-wise? I'm getting close. I was teaching over on Fisher Island when Sandy Hook happened. And it was in high school, and we were told not to tell the children what had happened that day. Parents were obliged to do that. And so it was fine. But then one little boy, about 8, came out and said he had been in the computer room. He had followed the news. He said, "Look what happened." He said, Sandy Hook Revisited, my poem. It's for Anne Mari Murphy, Christopher Dillon Hockley, and Senator Chris Murphy. As he was learning to read people, and to read life, to know what danger is, to know what is needed to succeed, all the big questions, in came a monster who began slaying the playmates the boy was beginning at last to play with. This was not a storybook monster, real slaughter everywhere. How could you trust anything if you already had trouble trusting what it meant to be a friend, to trust his eyes? She took him in her arms. To give him a flickering moment of fragile reassurance. Being human, loving each other. How we need to play today, she lied to him. In his confusion, she was able to give him this moment of hopeful distraction before the bullets got through them like a sword. And she wrapped him up with a mother's instinct, and they left us like angels to the sky, to the unknown. This is a little kid on the bus on the way up, the way back, and he reminded me of these children. Thank you. So I'm going to read an epilogue. As I mentioned, the subtext here is the Trump ascendancy to power. And it says, William has a wonderful poem that has it the painter titled Winter He Shapes Up, in which he writes, "Today the first snow fell. It hung in the hollow air, making space tangible, showing him how things are. So it was for me when I woke this morning and looked out the first snow during dusting the lawn." This is my house. The last lines of the poem tell the tale as I struggle to finish this account and move into the future. Though more of each day is dark, though he's awkward at the job, he squeezes paint from the tube, Hazard is back at work. I returned to America and a supermoon, the closest supermoon since 1948, just about the time I was born, 70 years ago. This fall I stood out under the moon like a goblin and took a photo of the moon glowing between the limbs of a tree, yoked in the yoke like our friendship William wrote about in his poem A Couple of Trees. How perilous in one another's thee our lives are, yoked in this yoke, two men leaning apart for light, but in a wind who give each other leave. This is my photo of that. And there ought to be, I don't know, there's about 2 minutes. One of my favorite commercials when I got home to America was for an insurance company selling homeowners insurance. The guy goes in and tries to file a claim for his air conditioner. The agent wrinkles her nose and says, "No, air conditioners aren't covered in your homeowners." "Well, what is covered?" he asks. "Well, things like earthquakes, volcanoes, a zombie apocalypse." In the window outside her office, we see zombies stumbling around and a woman who is not a zombie screaming, "Zombie apocalypse!" I really love American commercials. I think they're so good. God, they put so much energy and talent into them. I'm going to write a book about American commercials. And here's one that says, "Trump is not my fucking president." But there's a sort of, he is though, and now his name is on your body forever. It's a tattoo of that. So this is the last line of this book. And And the next supermoon will come January 2nd, 2018, just in time for the midterm elections. Perhaps by then things will have worked out. Now I know we're not all anti-Trumpers here, so we'll be a little bit serious. I must say too that if you buy a book, you get one of these free Mystic Seaport books. And now, Laura. I want to introduce you to. Excuse me. Right. I have to. I don't know how much time it takes. Laura is really the main act here. She and her husband have flown up from Virginia for this, and I'm really honored to be her publisher. And I wrote this introduction for her book. So bear with me. It's these dry eyes. In Robert Fagel's translation of Virgil, Aeneas, contemplating the Trojan War, cries out, "The world is a world of tears, and the burdens of mortality touch the heart." Laura Brylawski-Miller intuits the lacrimae rerum, the tears in things, throughout her poetry, and it's not only a result of the classic education she received in her native Italy, but a guiding insight that directs her view of the world, the shape of her soul. Like the Buddha of Sakuram, she is stunned by the suffering she sees in the world and is left with the only possible response, compassion for the human condition. Compassion in her, however, is not naivete. This intuition is perhaps what first led her to medicine, the sensitivity for the pain of others, the need to heal. Even when the healing process means debriding dead tissue with her poetic scalpel. First, do no harm. The Hippocratic Oath demands, but sometimes it requires severe measures, as every surgeon knows. Her husband was a rather famous surgeon in Georgia. Laura has a house in Bellagio, that Lakeview village where Pliny the Younger retreated from the summer's heat in Rome. There, when autumn seeps into the hills about Lake Como, the air is filled with autumn, the sweet smell of burning leaves, smoke rising like the vapors about the oracle of Delphi, recalling the weight of time, the precious brevity of life. Like a soothsayer or shaman, she intuits nature as it interacts with human consciousness, a literary device critics call pathetic fallacy, ascribing human sensibilities to non-human objects in nature. In her poems, the sun bleeds on the horizon, the newborn sea breathes quietly, the seaweed holds winter's spent fury in long green fingers. Like the Images poet Paul Valéry, she knows that poems are not made of ideas, but of images, and this philosophy is only ever evident in her poetry in practice, not in theory. It reveals the synchronicity of physical fact and spiritual reality. Mind and body become one, interacting and creating the world at once. The method of magic. Yet these poems are as real, as accessible as the air we breathe, or the pain at an injury. In their mild way, they are heartbreaking. She's both down to earth and a marvel. Laura's working method is invariably the same in all the poems, a pattern she has developed to perfection. Only after she has set the scene with precise images does she startle the reader with an unexpected epiphany. For Peter Meinke, for example, her poem Green Elegy offers not hope exactly, but affection, mercy, and ordinary kindness. But the charming image of a tiny rabbit taking refuge in the hospice park is undercut by the final chilling observation that the tiny rabbit doesn't know the dogs come here to play. So, I don't know who this woman really is, but I'm very happy to be associated with her.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming. This is very nice. I read an article on the New Yorker not too long ago. It was called In Defense of Poetry. And basically, it was really defensive poetry. It was